Yellow and Red Makes by Digi27, Chapter 41. Naruto watched helplessly in slow motion as Fu's crumbling body dropped through the sky, bringing up reserves of energy he didn't even know he had. Naruto launched himself from the stand platform. He fell as fast as he could, streaming his body and forcing chakra to his feet in a vain attempt to speed his descent. Finally, he caught up to Fu's body, her wings fluttering uselessly as the harsh wind battered for her body, her thin body. Naruto caught her and forced them both around in the air until she was on top of him, intending to use his own body to cushion their fall. They impacted the ground with a crash that was heard through the streets nearby, sending a plume of dust and debris into the air. Naruto groaned painfully from the drop. He felt all the places in his back and legs that were fractured and broken. He didn't care that much. His hands were frankly checking over Fu's body. Her skin was a little burnt in places, but the medic would be able to deal with that. He sighed in deeply as he felt a strong pulse from her neck. She must have used Chome's chakra to shield herself from the worst of the blast. Her eyes opened weakly and blinked a few times as she wondered what happened that made her end up in a rather deep crater. She groaned as she felt Naruto's hand checking over her body, and turning meekly in a sluggish and painstaking movement. She turned enough that she could crane her neck and looked at Naruto with her piercing eyes. But now slightly cloudy orange eyes. How did I do, Oni-san? She tried to laugh to make the situation less tense, but it came out as a racking cough. Naruto just smiled kindly back at her, not letting her see just how much pain he was in. You did great, Imoto. She nodded tiredly with a small smile on her face before passing out in her arms. Gently he laid her to one side, slowly getting her to his jar and quietly mending feet. He waited until a group of medics rushed over and pulled Fu onto a stretcher. The medic shinobi were all looking at him with awe. Nearly everybody watching the fight had seen him fall, and none were expecting him to even live. They forgot just how tenacious Naruto Uzumaki was. A deeply throated growl reverberated from his throat as he looked back up into the air to the still ongoing fight. He seemed to have missed something as his cloak now fluttered uselessly behind him on one arm. He grinned slightly maliciously, red oozing chocolate already gushing out of his pores and increasing the feral nature of his look. By the end of this fight, he fully intended to rip the bomber's other arm off for what he tried to do to Fu. It never crossed his slightly frenzied mind that Fu had merely gotten in the way of an attack meant for him. The non-cubified Naruto could deal with those consequences later. With the leap not possible for normal humans and even most shinobi, Naruto took to the air, leaving spiderweb cracks from the force of his feet leaving the ground. He ricocheted off a nearby tall building and nearly caved in the wall as his feet deftly pushed off of it. His hand formed hand signs, one each, and instantly a shadow clone appeared in front of him in the air. He used it like a stepping stone, it launching off of its prone form before it dispersed from the impact, and another was created in its place to continue the cycle. Naruto was now literally running across the path for himself through the air, chasing down the crazed bomber at incredible speeds. Didra looked back as he continued to dodge Santa, slowly working on his contingency plan. As his severed arm fed his exploding clay into Gaara's sand, he noticed a flaming Naruto charging him down, and his eyes opened wide. Not only briefly, he had never seen anybody so recklessly throw any chakra like that. Then again, he was dealing with what could potentially be the most powerful of the Jinchuriki. He motioned his bird to move faster, but Naruto just matched his acceleration, continuing to gain ground on the blonde missing Nin. He grimaced, already reaching into his satchel to make another bird after the moron fell for his trick again, only for a very strong and burning hot hand grabbed onto his wrist before he could touch his claim. He looked up in shock right into Naruto's red slit eyes, which stared back at him in absolute unquenching fury. Quickly, Didra secreted what little clay he had in his hand through the pores in his arms. He detonated in an attempt to rid himself of the other blonde's hands, which slowly but surely crushing the blonde's in his arm. He didn't work. The chakra coating around Naruto proved too resilient even for Didra's she won, and the blast was redirected back onto the bomber himself. He winced in pain. He was used to explosions from all his experimentation, but it still hurt like hell to have a blaster go off close to his skin. Naruto just growled again, not pleased that the explosion didn't take Data's arm off. Intending to finish the job, he placed a firm chocolate-coated foot on the Iwanen's back and pulled. Data may have already had one arm crushed by Garth Santa, but this was a whole different level of pain. He could feel the individual muscles and tendons in his arm strain and snap under the pressure until it became too much, and his arm was ripped off at the shoulder, sending a spurt of blood into the air. Data's scream was heard for hundreds of meters throughout the village, as even a full shinobi winced at the sound. Naruto just stared at the arm he was holding, throwing it away from him in disgust before returning his attention to the blonde in front of him. By now, the bird beneath the two of them was crumbling away as Naruto lost focus on it. Unable to channel his chakra any longer, they dropped from the sky, but Naruto didn't want it to be over yet. His crazed and angry mind only wanted to prolong the man's pain, to make him suffer for what he had to do. He caught him on the way down by the throat and grabbed the wall of a building as they fell down. His clawed hands created deep gashes that sent out bursts of dust and debris where claw met masonry until the two came to an absolute gentle stop on the ground. They were in the middle of a wide street where normal people could be seen bustling about as they went about their daily routes. Now it was eerily quiet due to all the civilians being relocated away from the dangerous fighting. Naruto threw the man he was holding to the floor harshly, letting his back crack. The paving stones beneath him with the force of it. The man's face was contorted in a pitiful attempt to mask his pain, unable to even clutch his wound to stunt the ever increasing pool of blood growing beneath him. He had been able to cauterize his other arm with his clay, but without either arm, that wasn't a possibility. To Naruto's displeasure, the man just started laughing, a weak but irritating chuckle that increased in volume. What's so damn funny? The dude just shook his head with a small smile, almost regretful if Naruto were inclined to believe him even a little. In the end, my heart just wasn't enough. He coughed harshly, unable to cover his mouth due to a lack of arms. But I didn't even get to reveal my masterpiece. He sighed regretfully before he was enveloped in another fit of coughs. He was still smiling, though, something that pissed off Naruto to no end. He was about to go over and finish the dying man quickly before his coughs once again turned into laughs. Before Naruto could do anything, they gagged slightly before splitting out a lump of clay that looked like a wailing ghost. Naruto just stared at it, knowing it was a bomb of some kind, but unsure of the scale of its explosion. Deidara had called it his masterpiece, so Naruto was wary. However, before the man could take up a new monologue as his dying words, Naruto reacted purely on instinct he didn't even know existed. He dashed across the street and scooped at the strange clay doll before in one movement he swallowed it whole. His mouth turned into a grimace as he tasted the second-hand clay before he felt it nestle in his stomach. The dude just looked at him with wide eyes, unexpecting that at all. He just thought it was some kind of desperate attempt to stop him. He activated the bomb with the last lingering remains of his chakra. You have no appreciation for art. True art, it's an explosion. Naruto felt a rumble in his stomach as Chibi Chakra invaded his insides, coating the lining of his stomach and throat before his body expanding into ridiculous proportions. The pressure was intense, and even with his pain-nullifying chakra cloak, Naruto's eyes watered, his neck expanding to match his body before he felt the pressure was too great, and he opened his mouth right at Deidara. The white-eyed bomber could only watch as the condensed energy from the explosion in the form of a thin stream of white light hurtled towards him. Beautiful. And then there was no more. Disintegrated by the heat and intensity of the blast into nothing but dust, Naruto dropped to the ground, feeling Kurama already trying to fix his stretched out muscles and ligaments from the pseudo-tail beast bomb. It was a lot weaker than one I had seen B do as an example, but it was enough to create an enormous trench along the ground, reaching all the way down the street, but stopping just before it hit the building. Gaara floated down to his position gently, looking slightly worn out from the light, but not exhausted like Naruto felt. Naruto just offered up a hand to show he was okay, but Gaara backed off with a nod, knowing by now just to let Naruto heal from these things at his own pace. After 5 minutes, he felt well enough to stand, albeit shakenly, and looking over at the massive trench he had created, he gulped at the damage before his eyes found a scorched mark at the very beginning of the trench, and he stumbled towards it. There was nothing left of Daedra. He was completely gone, wiped from the earth like he had never been there to begin with. He stood a little taller, a weak smile managing to make it onto his face despite the pain he was feeling. Gaara walked over again and held out his hand, confused. Naruto did the same, and Gaara dropped a ring into his palm. It was an ornate teal-colored ring with the kanji for blue and green inscribed in it. That's one. Naruto nodded grimly. This ring marked the first step in taking down the Akatsuki for good. They always work in pairs. Come on, his partner should be around here somewhere. And if he had to fly in, I'd say the seconds are around the gates. Gaara nodded, and the two of them set off. Naruto was slightly winded, but as they ran off, he felt his strength returning as his unnatural regeneration took care of it. Gaara knew exactly what his teammates' limitations were, and just allowed him to return, knowing the stubborn blonde would come even if he ordered Naruto not to. They made quick work of getting to the gates. Gaara had always thought the city that nobody else could manage by bringing down the entire walls of sandstone with a simple hand gesture before reforming it behind him. Likewise, Naruto was one of the fastest people alive, and he veered through the street after street, zigzagging at speeds that sent loose papers into the air as he passed by. They both rejoined at the same time in front of the long passage, both stopping on the dime when they both realized the same thing. Where are the guards? Gaara's eyes just narrowed as they scouted out the dark of the passageway, noticing the irregular lumps that lined the floor. Dead, all of them. Naruto just snarled, and his hand clenched into fist before he took a calming breath to relax himself. His eyes pierced into the darkness, using his latent light night vision to pick out the little details that even Gaara couldn't. There are explosive tags rigged all around the walls. It's a giant death trap. Gaara nodded in understanding. Can you disable them? Naruto just shook his head quickly. No, not in time. The other one, sorry if I remember from to your right, will get away. Gaara just sighed, and with a flick of his wrist, both jerky were lifted up into the air and carried over the immense walls on a cloud of sand. Gaara may not have had the reserves that Naruto did, but they were still impressive. His sand manipulation was also highly economical to his chakra consumption. It meant he still had a lot left in him for the fight that was surely to come. When they caught up to the famed puppet master, they landed on the ground silently, very carefully looking around for any more traps, while they simultaneously scouted for any signs of the other Akatsuki member. Their only warning was a flash of steel before Gaara's automatic defense intercepted an attacker. Naruto was actually a little surprised. He hadn't even seen the attack yet. Yet Gaara's defense blocked it like it was nothing. His sand never used to be that fast. It seems learning his father's magnet release increased his control over his main element. For Naruto, his only warning was the slight whistle of the wind before he bent his body back. Watching the tail-like blade sail over his torso, it whistled around in the air for a short period, emerging from the sand like a scorpion tail before sliding back down. Gaara didn't give into the chance to attack them again. As he crouched down on the ground and placed a hand on the floor, he extended his senses through the sand, looking for any disturbances that weren't just small insects. He smirked as he felt the slight vibrations that were caused when somebody uses the underground fish projection technique. He clenched his hand, homing in on the signature before attempting to crush it with the sand already around Satori. Naruto could only watch as Gaara concentrated with his eyes closed. Seeing his eyes moving about under his eyelids, he didn't even flinch as the metal tail reemerged from the ground and attempted to strike came the stand defense, batting away the semi-flexible steel appendage like it was made of paper. Suddenly, the stand burst up as Sasori was forced out of hiding before he could be completely crushed. He landed a good distance away from the two as Gar calmly stood up, turning almost painfully slowly towards their attacker. Not much could be seen thanks to the cloak and straw hat which obscured much of the man's body and face. A small cloth hung across his jaw, leaving the only visible part of his body, his bloodshot and hardened eyes. So you managed to kill that fool, Deidara. Why am I not surprised? He would have known better than to keep me waiting. His eyes was gravely and deep, and he spoke with clearly enunciated words. I suppose it's my turn now to capture the two of you. Very well. I just hope that Leader-sama can still perform the extraction with your bodies riddled with poison. You're in luck. I understand the procedure takes 3 days, exactly the time it takes for my poison to slowly work its way through your system, slowly destroying your cells from the inside out. As soon as the last words was out of his mouth, a hand came out to rip away his face mask, revealing a wooden and puppet-like mouth. It opened wide as a hell of Senbon erupted from somewhere deep inside. What they now knew was to be a puppet. Gar simply stretched out an arm, and a wall of sand caught every one of the projectiles before they could get close. The puppet's mouth closed again, revealing a sneer, or the closest puppet equivalent. So it's true, you really can't manipulate the sands to your whims. Gar remained silent. Talking during the fight wasn't really his thing. Naruto, on the other hand, was itching to go. Sasori's poison stopped him from rushing in, though. While Kyuubi might have been able to deal with it eventually, if it was as complex as the puppeteer made it out to be, then it would disable him long enough for the Suna missing Nin to land a more lethal blow. Well, are you gonna attack me yet? I hate to keep waiting. Garen just crushed his arms around his chest, assuming the most indifferent stance imaginable. I have no need to attack. The sands are mine to control, and you are currently standing in the desert. As if voicing its silent approval of its master's declaration, the sand around Sasori suddenly leapt into the air, trying to cocoon the man to crush him to death, or at least the puppet, which was the main concern right now. The steel tail-like blade just whipped around in a large spiral, dicing the sand into particles before it could become dense and cause him harm. Gara, where is Sasori? The redhead didn't look around, making sure to keep his eyes squarely on the puppet, relying on his defense to stave off any surprise attacks. Inside the puppet, Naruto looked back at the hunched over figure in surprise. What the? How do you know? He smirked a little. It actually looked a bit creepy to those that weren't used to him. You forgot that Kankuro is a puppeteer. I have been around him long enough to recognize chakra threads when I see them. The puppet has none attached to the outside, which means they must be from within. Naruto looked around again at Sasori inside his puppet shell. It would certainly rectify the issue the issue puppeteers have with being targeted instead of the puppets. Very good, Kasukage. Yes, this is Hiruko, one of my finer creations. Let me show you why. The cloak was suddenly ripped away from the body, revealing the form of a very muscular man down on all fours. The form of a very on all fours with the bladed tail whipping about, moving above him. Further revealing the animal Sasori was named for. The blade emerged from a demonic looking mask set on its lower body, looking like a piece of armor. There was a strange contraption on its left arm that looked like a large glove with a cylinder poking out of it. Let me see just how extensive your defenses is. The puppet raised his left arm, and suddenly all of the cylinders shot out of the glove with a hiss of steam. Once they were sufficiently high, the broke open. They broke open, unleashing a veritable hail of senbon, all surely laced with deadly poison. Even Naruto wasn't sure that Kyuubi could heal him if too many of those struck home. Luckily for him, Gar just made another hand motion, and a dome of sand erupted all around them. completely blocking off the metal rain. Interesting. The symbol didn't even dig in, merely bouncing off. That means you can harden your sand by compressing it. Gar let the wall dissolve so they could see their target again. Not didn't like flying blind like Gar could. The red kid merely maintaining contact by focusing his attention on the minute vibrations to the ground, building a perfect three-dimensional image of the outside of his dome. I may have to alter my plans a bit. The Hiruko puppet lifted his other arm, and a small canister shot out of a concealed space in the palm. Gar went to lift another blockade, hoping that the man would simply run out of weapons to use so he could end this swiftly. The last thing he saw before sand blocked his vision was the canister hiss and break apart, revealing a heavy rotating drill head. Both he and Naruto were surprised when the metal container burst through the sand before the cap broke off, and a heavy purple mist was ejected at high pressure. Gar made a move to jump back and away from the deadly gaseous poison before he could breathe it in, but Naruto beat him to it. Wind style, great break for the jutsu. Naruto breathed in heavily, only inhaling trace amounts of the deadly mist before he breathed out, expelling the gas away from the two of them. He panted slightly as a burning sensation erupted from his lungs before it was cleansed. Even so, it left him panting on the ground, clutching his chest in pain. Gar knew he would be all right. He still had the puppet to deal with, so he dropped the barrier, preparing for the puppeteer's next attack. You two working together seem to nullify many of Hiruko's main fighting abilities. In that case, Sasori stopped his monologue as soon as he saw the Naruto on the ground clutching his chest, bursting into a cloud of smoke, the poison becoming too much for the clone. Rasengan! If the puppet could be surprised than Hiroko was, he never expected the swirling vortex of energy that erupted from the ground beneath his exposed belly. The condensed chakra easily ripped through the wood of the puppet, splintering it as it tore through the weakness on its underside. Before he could finish it, a second shadow darted out of the puppet's body and dashed across the sand to get a safe distance away from them, or at least as safe one could be when standing in a desert while fighting Gara no Sabuki. No Sabuki. No Subaku. Interesting. Nobody has ever forced me out of Hiruko, and since I joined the Akatsuki, I would almost commend you if I didn't know you were going to die anyway. Naruto backed away from the unveiled puppeteer, not knowing what tricks he had up his sleeves. From memory, he knew Kankuro could seal his puppets into scrolls. That meant Sasori could as well, so there was no telling how many he hit across his person. The man turned around to face them, only to reveal the face of a boy no older than Naruto or Gaara, with unruly red hair, wearing typical Akatsuki robes. He stood comfortably across from them on the sand, unperturbed by the fact it could erupt around him at any moment. This has been a good fight, God of the Desert. How about a reward? Why don't you say hello to your predecessor? In a flash of movement, there was a burst of smoke, and when he cleared, a robot figure floated above Sasori's shoulder. Its long black hair hung in a disorderly manner above its unsettling human-like face. Meet the third Katsukage. Nitachi of the Iron Sand. Gar's eyes narrowed as he looked up the face of the puppet that looked back with dead glazy eyes. So you are the one who killed the third. Sasori just smirked. The man should have known better than to deny my right to teach puppetry as it should have been taught. None of those ready-made puppets that only weaken Suna. The puppeteer caught himself reeling back his emotions after letting the young Kage get the better of him like this. Truly, your sand manipulation is a curious ability. After all this is over, you will take pride of place in my collection. But first, let's see how you two legendary manipulators do against one another. Neither jerky could react fast enough before the puppet opened its mouth and exhaled a dark cloud of fine iron particles. However, what Sasori wasn't expecting was for Gaara's hand to suddenly come up, and his control over the fine granule lesson. Gaara seemed to be visibly straining as his hand trembled, held out in front of him with his palm facing outwards. There was a loud groaning sound as the Iron Sand convulged in midair, conflicting between two different magnetic fields. Gar may have been the weak manipulator, still unused to magnet release, but on the other end, the stand was only being controlled via proxy, which lessened its efficiency. Soon the sand began to be pushed back, condensing as it went, moving towards the puppet and its master as it gained speed, and Gaara's body trembled from the exertion. Sasori could only look on shocked as the mass of sand tore its way towards him, obliterating the third Kasakage puppet before the master puppeteer could pull it out of the way, before it could slam into him. Sasori jumped up as high as he could, two rotary blades on his back whirling to life as they carried him up above the stand, hovering like a hummingbird. His cloak had been torn to pieces in the process, revealing his true body, lines along the joints indicating just what the ex-Tsunade had done to himself. Well, that was unexpected. I was uninformed. You knew the magnet release. While certainly annoying, I still have more than enough to deal with. Sasori made a simple mistake that could almost be described as a rookie error. He had taken his eye off his opponent. He looked down to see a greedy Naruto hanging onto his legs before the body swung up with incredible upper body strength, implanting a foot directly into the redhead's face. Naruto heard a crack, but he felt the blade spinning on Sasori's back. Came around in an attempt to shred him, so he let go and dropped to the ground with a soft thud. Both he and Gaara looked up to see that Sasori hadn't even flinched as a large crack appeared across his otherwise pristine youthful face. Your efforts are in vain. I have transcended mortality. This body feels no pain, no exhaustion, no fatality or injury. If it breaks, I repair it. If it is destroyed, I rebuild it. And if I find it in imperfection, I fix it. There's nothing you can do to stop me. Naruto just sighed into his palm. He certainly attracted the strangest of enemies. God complex much. Sasori remained impassive, not responding to the jab as he focused on Gaara. To him, the more serious opponent, he saw Kunai approach from the corner of his eye, and the cable in his stomach shot out and swatted it away from him to stand harmlessly in the sand, too far for it to be of any use to his enemies. Your Haraishin ability is well known to me, Uzumaki. Your kunai will not get close enough. The flexible cord flicked around a few times as if in agreement. Gaara, can't you just drop the desert on him or something? Gaara almost looked back, amused that Naruto thought he could do such feat. It wasn't that he had actually tried to have a desert, but it sounded highly improbable. Manipulating that amount of iron sand was tiring. If I attempted such a maneuver, it would surely kill me, Jinchuriki or not. Naruto just nodded with his mouth curled to one side and thought. However, Sasori didn't particularly feel like waiting for them to come up with a plan to defeat him. One of the scrolls on his back flashed briefly before two hollow tubes appeared from his palms. One aimed to each of his attackers. A brilliant jet of flames burst from each tube, roaring down on their targets. As Gaara pulled up his defense, and Naruto simply ran, using his advantageous speed to outrun the flames licking at his heels. Gaara was surprised when he saw the barrel of the flame. The flamethrower turned, and the flames went from scalding hot red to intense white, nearly forcing him to cover his eyes. It finally ran out of fuel, and the flames petered out, but Gaara's eyes widened when he realized the barrier he had erected had been turned into glass from the sheer heat from the weapon. Before he could react, the extendable wire shot out, smashing through the glass and impacting heavily into his stomach. The only thing stopping the sharpened tip from piercing him was his sand armor. Instead, he was simply flung backwards to land harshly on the ground. Naruto could finally stop running, wincing as the burns he had received on his back and heels slowly healed. He had just fought Deidara, so he was quickly tiring in his fight. He would have to end it quickly or risk getting him and Gaara hurt or captured. Using nearly the last of his stamina, Naruto created as many clones as he could, roughly 500 in total, to which Sasori cast a curious eye. He smirked as another scroll flashed brightly before disappearing. So, you have an army? Well, how about you meet the army that took down an entire nation? In an enormous explosion of smoke, Naruto's eyes widened as the sun was blotted out. A mass shadow appeared above the desert as hundreds of puppets lit the sky, all connected to Sasori by chakra threads in a compartment in his chest. Naruto just felt his shoulders go limp as all the clones looked up in awe. Well, shit! There was a moment when the world seemed to stand still, not a single grain of sand moved across the desert, and nobody breathed. Then it was over. A gust of wind rolled across the dunes, and the clones rushed in, met quickly by the many puppets as the two forces battled it out. Sasori maintained his height, watching over the battlefield to prevent any surprise attacks like the one that nearly caught him out before. His glassy eyes darted over the ground, while his hands deftly controlled his small army as they wiped out the batches of the clones in thrones. In throngs. He smiled at the pathetic attempt to defeat him. For every puppet he lost, Naruto would lose 10 clones. It wouldn't be enough to even the playing field. His eyes widened as something bright flashed through the sky, too fast for him to effectively maneuver out of the way with his rotors. His puppet eyes saw a streak of gold sliced through one of his propellers before he lost control and ungracefully hit the ground in a crouch. He stood up as quickly as his artificial joints would allow, only for his body to suddenly be littered with impacts. His eyes blinked a few times in shock as the many puppets around him all convulsed before falling limp to the sandy floor. He slowly looked down at his body, seeing the many poison-laced sandbones sticking out of his body, or more importantly, the single metal needle implanted directly in his core. Oh, how ironic! And with that, Sasori of the Red Sand fell to his knees, dead before his already lifeless head hit the ground. The multitude of Naruto clones standing around him breathed a sigh of relief before popping out of existence, leaving the original to watch. Asgard withdrew his gold dust back into the pouch on his belt. The two looked at each other, smiling weakly as they glanced around the battlefield, hundreds of broken or lifeless puppets littering the desert. I'm not cleaning this up. End of chapter 41.